My name's Hugo Grimston and I'm CFO of Paddle. Unfortunately, the answer is yes. The obligation to charge tax is on the seller of the software. And if you fail to do it, then kind of ignorance is no excuse. The tax authorities will come after you for interest and potentially other penalties. So that's not strictly true. Software is taxed in a very different way to normal kind of e-commerce or physical goods. So the important thing is where your customer is based. The big change now is that in the US, there is the concept of economic nexus as opposed to physical nexus, which means that if you make a certain amount of sales into a US state, then you are theoretically liable for tax. That will be the case in certain instances and certain countries. However, there are countries in the world which have no threshold. So effectively from the first dollar you sell into that country, you have to register for tax, such as Russia and South Korea. Also, a lot of jurisdictions have very low thresholds, which mean that you have to register when you have made a certain value of sales. So EU, for example, is 10,000 euros across the EU before you have to start charging tax. And the US, there is a number of transactions per state, and it's only about 200 in most states. So generally, you don't have to be that big to be caught by the tax authorities. So the penalties for non-compliance are payment of back taxes, interest on those payments, and potentially additional penalties if you've done it maliciously. That sounds like it is not such an issue, but if you have been non-compliant for a number of years, the bills can be massive, and it's very unlikely you'll be able to reclaim that tax from the customer. Yes, you do. The fact that you are registered in any particular jurisdiction doesn't exempt you from being registered in another jurisdiction. And no tax authority is going to give you credit for paying tax somewhere else because that doesn't mean money in their pocket. Generally not. When you sell via reseller, the obligation to be registered, calculate the correct amount of tax and make filings lies with that reseller, and the supply from you to the reseller is generally free of tax. If the reseller is compliant or not compliant within any jurisdiction, you shouldn't really care because you have no tax obligation anyway. So that's their problem, basically. So yeah, you're partly right in that B2C sales tax is more prevalent than B2B. However, there are some jurisdictions which don't distinguish between B2C and B2B, so the US being a big and prominent example. Similarly, sales within Europe, for them to be B2B, they need to be VAT registered. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are just business customers. Therefore, you may have sales tax obligations to people who you think are businesses, but from a VAT perspective, they are seen as consumers. You could definitely do this yourself, but it is incredibly complex and time-consuming. So very briefly, you need to register for sales tax in a bunch of different jurisdictions. You need to ensure that your checkout is calculating the correct amount that needs to be charged to each customer and keeping up to date with new tax rates. You then need to file and submit and pay in a bunch of different jurisdictions, all of which is really painful. Or you could use merchant of record. No compliance, no liabilities, no hassle, and super easy.